Breaking tonight, the death toll rising after the worst terrorist attack to hit Jerusalem in years. 5 people are now dead, including 3 Americans. At least 7 others injured as the FBI joins the investigation, and security is tightened at high-risk locations here in the United States. Welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. The scene was gruesome in a quiet neighborhood in West Jerusalem, a spot far removed from the usual flashpoint for violence in this city. It was early this morning in Israel when 2 Palestinian cousins in their 20s entered a synagogue with at least 1 gun, a meat cleaver, and knives, intent on literally butchering the more than 24 people inside. While shouting Allahu Akbar or God is great in Arabic, they started in on whoever they found. These are violent, disturbing images. At least 3 of the 5 men killed were rabbis, including one from Boston, one from Detroit, another from Boulder, Colorado. The man who just died tonight was a police officer responding to the scene. The images from the attack are horrific. Here you see a man who escaped the terror attack on the steps of the synagogue, covered in blood. And this is the image of a book on the floor of the sacred space, stained in blood. The terrorists were killed on sight, but when Israeli security forces went to arrest other suspects, the Palestinian crowds attacked and police there had to respond with tear gas and stun grenades. Watch. The Israeli Prime Minister says the homes of the 2 killers will be bulldozed and vowed that Israel will, quote, respond harshly. On the other side, while Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas condemned the attacks, Hamas praised them. The news cameras caught scenes of many Palestinians celebrating. Some doing, look at this, look at this. This is in response to the event I just told you about. Doing a victory dance for the cameras while waving flags, handing out candy and cookies. Look at this. Others waving hatchets or guns to mimic the attackers. Back in Washington, President Obama said both sides really have to work together.
We condemn in the strongest terms these attacks. Secretary Kerry has spoken to Prime Minister Netanyahu. President Abbas has strongly condemned the attacks. Too many Israelis have died, too many Palestinians have died. And at this difficult time, I think it's important for both Palestinians and Israelis to try to work together to lower tensions and to reject violence. The majority of Palestinians and Israelis overwhelmingly want peace. The United States wants to work with all parties involved to make that a reality.
Joining me now, Ambassador Ron Dermer, Israel's ambassador to the United States. Ambassador, thank you for being here tonight. And your thoughts on President Obama calling for both sides now to maintain the peace, remain calm, and step down the violence.
Well, we appreciate that the president condemned this action. We appreciate the Secretary of State, John Kerry, condemned the action. Unfortunately, President Abbas did not unequivocally condemn it. You said that you had mentioned that he had condemned it, but if you actually read the text of what he said, the first sentence of his remark was a condemnation, and the next sentence was once again accusing Israel of invading the Al-Aqsa Mosque that sits on the Temple Mount. So on the one hand, he's condemning it, with the other hand, he's inciting. This is a huge problem. The world has to send a very clear message to President Abbas that it is totally unacceptable to continue this incitement to violence and hatred against Israel. That's what led to the attacks that you saw today.
Are we going to see that? Because we heard from President Obama, who said that President Abbas condemned these attacks. I mean, there was no second statement about, but then he went on to say the following things, and that's not sufficient, and he needs to own up. It was, thankfully, President Abbas has condemned the attacks, period.
Well, why don't you just put it up on the screen and let your viewers decide for themselves exactly what President Abbas said. They don't condemn it unequivocally. And remember, Megyn, President Abbas is sitting in a government with a group of terrorists. He is in a pact with a terror organization, Hamas, the same people who were dancing in the streets, those images that you just showed on television. President Abbas is in a government with them. So why is the world not sending a clear message to President Abbas? You have to end this pact with a terror organization. We're not going to accept you as a legitimate interlocutor for peace if you're in a pact with a terror organization. What kind of message does that send? What the Europeans are telling President Abbas is, we don't really care that you joined up with a terror organization. We don't really care that you're inciting the public against Israel, against Jews, against all the values that we believe in. We don't care about that. We'll give you a state. We'll hand it to you on a silver platter. That's the message he's hearing from Europe. If he doesn't hear a consistent message from the international community that there is no justification for terrorism, we're not interested in your grievances, President Abbas, unless you turn your back on the terror organization Hamas, you stop this incitement against Israel and against Jews, and you turn towards some path towards peace with Israel.
Mm-hmm. What do you make of Mr. Netanyahu's promise to respond harshly? What does that mean? Because we saw violence before that led to an outbreak of war over 3 murders of Israelis, and now we see this today. The Americans killed had dual citizenship, Israeli-American, but now we have 5 dead. What do you expect is about to happen?
Well, I think that the Prime Minister will do what he has to do to restore security in our nation's capital. This is a savage murder at a synagogue in our capital. Imagine that people went in with meat cleavers and guns into a church in Washington, D.C., and started hacking people to death, and then you saw people dancing in the streets. What type of action would America take? So the Prime Minister is going to do what he has to do to protect Israel's citizens. He's done that in the past, and you can rest assured when the Prime Minister makes a promise, he keeps it.
That video is shocking. I mean, it is almost as shocking as the bloody scenes that we saw in the wake of the attack this morning was the dancing, the handing out of candy and cupcakes. We saw children, we saw elderly women celebrating these meat cleaver attacks as people were worshiping in a synagogue. Ambassador, how on earth do you ever go forward? How can there ever be a negotiation with these people?
Well, it's really sick, and what you're expressing right now is the right outrage that you need in looking at these scenes. Unfortunately, what you're expressing, the outrage that you're expressing is not shared by governments around the world. They have swept under the rug the problem of incitement. For 20 years right now, since the peace process began, if you saw, Megyn, day after day, what Palestinians were putting on their television stations, which they control, in their official media, the newspapers that they control, in their textbooks, which they control in their schools, if you saw what they were educating a generation of Palestinians to believe, the scenes you saw today would not be shocking. And unfortunately, the world seems to be obsessed and outraged by the idea of Jews building apartments in Jewish neighborhoods in Jerusalem that are going to be part of Israel in any future peace agreement that you can possibly imagine. This summons outrage by the international community. If they would spend 1/10 of the time that they spend focusing on this building in these Jewish neighborhoods, focusing on incitement within Palestinian society, we'd be a lot closer to peace today.
Before I let you go, I want to get your comments on what's happening now with our negotiations with Iran and its nuke program. We're almost at the deadline.
Well, Israel's very concerned. We're very concerned that a deal will be signed with Iran that will effectively leave it as a threshold nuclear power. Remember, Israel not only wants to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon today, we want to prevent Iran from having the capability to develop a nuclear weapon tomorrow. And we're concerned that Iran will be left with an advanced nuclear weapons-making capability that will enable them to make nuclear weapons in the future. We believe that the only good deal is a deal that will dismantle the sanctions in return for the full dismantling of Iran's military nuclear capability. That is not the deal that's on the table. And we're very concerned that a deal will be signed that will be a very, very bad deal, not just for Israel, but for all the Arabs in the region and ultimately for the entire world.
Ambassador Dermer, thank you so much for being here. We'll continue to follow it.
Thank you.